Hey up lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more Infinite Lagrange. Today, going back through into the ships. I was expecting to actually get one of the videos out in the new server, but I swear it said it started on the 28th, which is the day that I'm recording this. But now it says the 2nd or something, so maybe I made a mistake when I read it off the site. But anyway, we got the ships to go through for the ship guides anyway, so I'm going to carry on with that. We have the Xeno Stinger done. If you haven't seen that, go check out the channel. It'll be the first video up there at the moment. And yeah, we're going to jump in. Might as well go for the Reliat here. So you noticed I have pretty good amount of tech points within the frigates. Most of them are around 100. And for the ones that have the multiple variants that are pretty decent, the Xeno Stinger, the Reliat, you can see I'm going up to sort of the 200 tech point mark there. And that's why I can use both variants at the same time quite comfortably. So we'll start off with the Reliat. This got an interesting change, especially this anti-ship type version. It got quite a nice buff to its weapon system. So it does, reasonable amounts of damage now. I'd still recommend the Torpedo type and the Stealth type ahead of it, but if it's the only one you've got, it's the only one you've got. So this is a mid-row ship, unlike the Xeno Stinger that sits on the back row, which means it tends to get targeted by corvettes and missiles and any indirect fire a little bit quicker than, say, stuff at the back row. That being said, for some reason, everything just targets Xeno Stingers general, so, you'll have to just deal with that as it comes with the Xeno Stinger. In the case of this, I would recommend going into the armor system first, just picking up the HP and the short-range stealth coating here, which will give you a chance to dodge missiles and torpedoes. I would absolutely go short-range stealth coating above the kernel structure enhancement on this ship. It also has system adjustment, short-range stealth coating, which can further increase its dodge rate of missiles and torpedoes, which is extremely nice being mid-row, because as long as there's stuff on the front row, the mid-row won't get hit by direct fire weapons until the front row is gone, so you are actually only mostly dodging missiles and torpedoes in that instance. So it's actually quite a nice enhancement. I don't personally run the base variant myself because I have stealth and I have torpedo, and like I said, I do recommend those over. However, in testing, I can tell you it is pretty good now. So after you've got your basic sort of keep it alive together, which is again short range coating, kernel structure, that's when you can then go into the weapon systems. I tend to do this for all front row and mid row ships. You'd rather have 2,000 damage on the board for a longer period of time than maybe get 3,000 damage from the upgrades, and they last like half the amount of time, because trust me, that dodge rate for the missiles and stuff adds up pretty quickly on the Reliat, because it's just quite a good ship. We start with 35% dodge rate as a base from the evasion on the propulsion system. So getting like a further, even if it is only for missile and torpedo, more reduced hit rate, it adds up pretty quick, and now you sort of sat at like a 50% odd dodge rate. So, it's like living about 20-30% longer. So 2,000 damage for 30% longer is better than maybe like 20% damage increase on picking up all of its weapon upgrades. And I do that for the front row ships as well, so I'm going to explain it now, so I can just sort of dabble on that a little bit in later videos. So the anti-ship torpedo system, after you grab those upgrades, is quite nice. I haven't actually got the damage increase on this one for 5%. I think I ran out of weapon tech when I was trying to upgrade the Reliats. But it does have the dense cluster munition system, which I tested out, which is actually quite nice. And the dense clusters, when the target is a frigate, increase the number of bomblets by 2, and it decreases the damage of single bomblets by 15%. The enhancement, off the top of my head, if I remember correctly, reduces the damage reduction. So you're doing more damage by the end of it, basically, which is actually quite nice. And it does a pretty decent job because it fires quite a lot to munitions. If we have a look in its weapon system here, you got 4 attacks by 5 every round, and you're adding 2 on from the strategy, so it's 4 by 7 then. So all of a sudden you're like, this thing's chucking out quite a lot of damage, and okay, it is a missile system. There is, chance of dodge rates and stuff like that happening, but it doesn't really matter too much. I don't understand why it has prioritized aircraft on here. If you actually see, we get Corvette Fighter. I have very, very rarely ever seen them do any damage whatsoever with this missile system against corvettes and fighters, and they do damage versus destroyer frigate. So I'm not certain what's going on here with this system. I literally just can't explain it. It says aircraft, it doesn't. It goes for destroyers and frigates every single time. You can see even that its damage against is pretty substantially lower than its anti-ship fire. So I'm not sure if it's like they intended it to be anti-air and then they forgot to actually change its priorities or what. Especially when you have things where it's like, when the target is a frigate, well, that's not air either, is it? So, I don't know. Not entirely sure what's really going on with that. It's on this weapon system. It's on its air weapon system, which makes sense, the air defense system, but not its main weapon system. I would recommend picking up dense cluster munitions as soon as possible. However, I would actually recommend going into the missile hit rate and torpedo hit rate first. That is my recommendation, getting your hit rate up so you can actually apply as much of the damage as possible before increasing its damage. Once you picked up the guidance signal enhancer, I would then personally be picking up the strategy on here before going into the cooldown. The reason I like cooldown on this is pretty much due to the fact that you only get at 35 damage per hit, so a 10% increase from any of the missile or torp damage increases is actually only like 3.5 per upgrade. With a cooldown is you get a lot more damage output from it than you will from the missile and torp damage. Ignore the fact that it is sit here saying you're going to get a larger increase from damage. You won't. You will get a larger increase of damage from the cooldown. More shots in the time that it's alive versus bigger shots, and they are very, very limitedly bigger. It's a tiny amount, 3.5 damage per shot. So bear that in mind. Cooldown, hit rate, strategy, double cooldown. From there, you do have quite a lot of play on this ship with 4 modules. So you have got things like increased system HP, siege damage. I wouldn't ever recommend the siege damage on this ship. It just flat out isn't worth it. At 280 damage, there's much better ships in here that'll deal with that. Again, it has lock-on efficiency for the anti-aircrafts, but I also don't recommend that. But I think you do get shafted into using it anyway because you pick up the hit rate, the strategy, 2 of the cooldowns, that's 4 of your 7, double the damage after that, and then you might as well pick up the lock-on efficiency, albeit I've never really seen it firing at aircraft, so I wouldn't probably go for that. Maybe this is where you go for the system HP just to round it off at that 7th point, or just leave it blank and save yourself some tech points. After that system, going into the rapid energy battery, I think it's called. And I'm clicking all the wrong buttons today. Rapid fire battery system. Here, the strategy actually helps out because weapons will lock onto enemy aircraft in the nearby row and launch attacks. By nearby row, because I've seen this asked again recently because some newer players are coming back to the game, nearby row means the same row it's in. It doesn't mean that if this is in mid row, it's going to shoot at the back row or the front row for aircraft. It means the same row. So bear that in mind. When things in strategy say nearby row and launch attacks, it is the same row only. So do be aware of that. Increased hit rate. Also really good on it for 40% every 30 seconds for 25 seconds, which means it's only got a 5-second downtime before this is back up online. If you are getting hit by any aircraft at all, you want this first. After that, picking up the hit rate further, and then going for the cooldown, double cooldown for your 4 or 5 slots, and then your lock-on efficiency. Again, not going to recommend the damage here. The damage is so low, you're going to get 1 damage for 5 upgrades, and it's 5 tech points for 1 damage for every shot. It's just not worth it. You'll get a lot more out of decreasing the cooldown on this weapon system, like considerably more. However, they're not particularly great anti-aircraft. Do not rely on the Reliat for your AA. It's not going to do the job that you need it to do. You're better looking at the Mare T. You're better looking Wing to SARS. Even light cones to an extent have a better AA capabilities than this. There are better AA ships, so you can just flat out ignore this system entirely once you've got the main weapon system and the armor done. And then obviously at the end, you can go cruising speed and warp speed here as well, albeit maybe not completely necessary at 4,000 warp speed. Everything maxes out now at 1,200 cruising speed, so you can save yourself some tech points. The base version fits in most fleets. Generally speaking, if you have B or C, so the torpedo type or stealth type, you do drop the base version of A, and it doesn't get used so much. However, it can be used as a pseudo mid-road tank, and that's to just, soak up missile damage because of its good dodge rate. Thing shoots at it, doesn't get hit, stays alive quite well, and it has some ability to deal with anti-frig, anti-destroyer. Mid-game, it drops off quite significantly. It hasn't got the damage output. Frigs start to disappear, so now all of a sudden its strategy isn't quite as useful anymore. And yeah, you do start seeing now like full destroyer fleets or destroyer cruiser fleets are quite prevalent. Hybrid is a mix of destroyer, cruiser, battle cruiser, and carrier. No frigs in my version of it, which you can search for. It's not really changed, to be honest with you. Swarm's mostly cruiser now with Jaegers and Predators. There are some destroyers in there. You can get variants of that running Special Carillion, at which point this is actually does really well against Special Carillion. Something I should mention, if you are seeing Special Carillion spam, the A variant of the Reliat Torpedo is actually really good at knocking out Carillion spam. So bear that one in mind if you do start seeing your enemies spamming Special Carillion. It's not quite as prevalent as it used to be. But yeah, definitely something you can sort of have a play around with if you're seeing them running it. Next up, the Torpedo type. Now this is some people's favourite. I personally prefer the stealth over this variant. I like both equally. This is the higher damage output variant for absolutely certain. Again, you're running it because it's got 35% evasion. We can get more evasion on its on the short range coating again. Again, this can be upgraded, so you can get quite a lot of sort of dodge rate on this ship. And it does a great job as a mid-road tank. It basically runs entirely identical to the A-type. It's just the torpedo system gets swapped out. Instead of having a sort of small arms fire cluster, you get a nice big hefty explosive energy torpedo. Something to note as well, it is energy damage. So energy damage is generally flat out better than sort of kinetic damage, and the reason for that is mostly because of how armor works, and armor is a flat damage reduction. So say you're shooting an ST-59 and you're shooting it with an 800 damage torpedo. If that ST-59 is running heavy armor, it's got 720 damage mitigation. That means you're only going to hit that ST-59 for 10% of its damage, which is like crazy, and that's why armor is such a strong value in this game. because it can flat out ruin certain ships' ability to do any damage at all. Whereas energy is always a percentage damage reduction. So in the case of this ship, most ships can go up to around 20%, about 20% energy reduction, which means you're still going to hit them for 80 damage here, but you're only hitting them with 100 damage energy torp. So, if you're hitting them with an 800 damage energy torp, you're still going to get 80% of that damage through. So you can see where energy damage sort of comes into its own, especially later on, especially when cruisers start coming out, because a lot of them are around 50 armor to 80 armor, 80 with upgrades. A lot of them sit around there, but they all mostly still sit around that 10 to 20% energy resistance. So energy damage, really, really good. This weapon system is it's pretty good for anything large, cruisers, anything sort of big like that, again, because of the energy damage. First off, take the missile hit rate. This really does help boost its damage output, and I saw increases of 15 to 20% just from picking the missile hit rate up on this thing over anything else. So in my opinion, this is like a requirement on this ship completely. Bear in mind though that the issue now is with light cone becoming quite prevalent. You are going to have issues with any missile or any torpedo system where they can get knocked. The missiles can get knocked out, don't meet their target, so they do 0 damage. After that, I personally go double cooldown, and then I usually skip the key targets, which when the enemy fleet includes battle cruisers, it prioritize attacks on those targets and increases damage by 25%. It does mean that you get a nice little damage bump, but now you are prioritizing targets as battle cruisers, and I just don't find the damage output of this ship worthwhile to really be sticking into battle cruisers. You're going to be hitting 125 damage from the strat, which is quite nice until you sit there and go, yeah, but battle cruisers are sat around 150,000 HP. Some of them lower, ST-59's a bit lower, but then that also can run EM armor, so it's going to mitigate even more damage output of this thing. So I quite like having this going for things like cruisers, which means I like ignoring the key target strategy, because I like to have it hitting cruisers, which are only 10-20% energy resistances, lower HP pulls, so I might reliably be able to remove DPS off the field with them. Where if this is prioritizing battle cruisers, yes, it's going to definitely help knock out the battle cruisers, but you are relying on, more often than not, other battle cruisers to kill their battle cruisers, or you've got some very high damage ships or aircraft that are going after battle cruisers instead. So I like to free this up so all its damage can apply to cruisers and destroyers, because it can hit them pretty reliably. It has got a carrier preference, which does suck a little bit sometimes, and then it should shoot battle cruisers after shooting carriers, but I tend to find it shoots the cruisers before the battle cruisers. But I can confirm it definitely likes shooting at carriers quite a bit, and most of the battle reports I have using it. So you might as well, personally, I ignore key targets. I like picking up the double damage here, because you're going to get 120 damage off of that. There's your sort of 5 slots, because you're going to go double cooldown with this with a hit rate. There's your 5 slots, and you got 2 left. 1 left. I quite like picking the crit damage. This actually does work on this system. We can see here that it has a 15% chance to crit to deal an additional 200% damage to the target. By picking up the crit damage, you can get an extra 40% damage, and that kind of makes this a little bit redundant. You could argue dropping a single one of the damage mods to pick up the battle cruiser key target, and then picking up the crit damage, but regardless, always pick up the crit damage on this ship. It works fantastically. Similar to the A-type, you've got identical anti-aircraft system where you want to pick up the lock-on strategy here, which means it'll lock onto any aircraft in row and launch attacks, increasing hit rate and everything. Then picking up the hit rate and double cooldown is the way to go there. And then probably finishing off with probably the lock-on efficiency. The pulse cannon damage, again, we've only got 20 damage per hit. 2 extra damage doesn't really mean too much on this thing. Lock-on efficiency is just going to get you locked onto aircraft a bit more efficiently and be able to sort of attack a bit more efficiently. The Reliat, well, the energy torp or torpedo type Reliat, I recommend running late, early to mid, and it can carry into late game. Now, the reason for that is early game, frigates and stuff, you do still see Special Carillion around that Frig Desi archetype early game, which means later on, you know, late mid-game when people start getting a couple of cruisers out, sometimes the, you know, those Special Carillions start being removed. That's where this starts really entering its own. It struggles against Special Carillion if it does target them. Yes, it's a torpedo, so it should fire over them most of the time, but sometimes you are left with 10 Carillions sat in front of you, and they're just going to sit there and wait for you to kill them and, you know, tie up your entire fleet for... It can be a long time with Special Carillion on the board, unfortunately. So, plus being, you know, mid-row tank, it works quite well. I prefer it mid-game. That's when more heavier fleets come out. That's when you start seeing battle cruisers. That's when you start seeing cruisers. In that situation, this is fantastic at that. And again, it's got good mid-row presence thanks to its evasion. It's got base 35%. It can be upgraded with the short-range coating, stealth coating. So you can sit this in mid-row, and they live quite well and do a lot of damage. Fits in most fleets because of that. You can run it in hybrid fleets. I've seen hybrid fleets with some frigates in it. Often or not, it's normally Reliat. So yeah, pretty good all-round frigate. You can run it earlier in early game. I just choose not to. I think the A-type does a little bit better early game. Or I tend to run things like Xenos and stuff, and I don't need the sort of damage output that the Reliat does. Well, the additional damage output or the mid-row tank till a bit later. Stealth type. I'm going to mention a fleet at the end of C, at the end of the stealth type, where I actually run both B and C in the same fleet, and it's actually quite nasty. So we'll talk about the stealth type first. Stealth type, again, you get a base 35% evasion, which is really quite nice, and you can further increase that with short-range stealth coating, which got buffed. It brings this up to some really, really stupid amount of missile evasion. Because if we further go into what used to be on the A and the B type Reliat, its anti-air system, you have no anti-air system on this. You gain an additional 35%, so now you're at 70% based dodge rate because of the propulsion's giving you 35%, and it is additive. You get an extra 35% here. You can further decrease this with even more. Guided weapons are missiles and torpedoes, so people know. Direct fire weapons are railguns, cannons, anything that shoots straight, basically. So you're picking both of these up. You get an extra 40% dodge rate on guided weapons. You pull this thing into a position where it basically almost dodges everything. And then they decided that, you know what, it wasn't enough dodge. Let's give the short-range coating an upgrade. And it is kind of disgusting in the mid-row now. Like, it's almost Special Carillion levels of dodge rate. And it's permanently active. It's not Special Carillion where it's like, oh, I got 90% dodge rate for, what, like 10, 15 seconds or whatever that thing has. No, this thing is just, like, permanently in a mid-row dodge. And it's got ridiculous amount of dodge rate against missiles, guided weapons. And it can stick around for absolutely ever. And this is the reason why I prefer the stealth over the torpedo. Okay, These cluster missiles, they look good. They're 200 damage per hit, but they are kinetic damage, which means they get heavily mitigated by heavy armor. You've got the same thing for the battle cruisers here, but again, battle cruisers, even CTGs and stuff, which actually aren't like heavy armor battle cruisers, unlike the Spear and the ST-59, they still hit like 150, 200 armor, like quite easily. So, you know, you're getting most of your damage mitigated against those heavy fleets, but this is just going to sit there forever. And if anything on your front row gets down to 10% health, so it evades back into the mid row, now you've got this Reliat that's going to be tanking for it, while it might be getting healed because you have Cass in your fleet, or you might have Noma in your fleet. Then it's going to go and move back to the front row, and something's going to retarget, and then it's going to... And you get this little bouncing effect of front row ships coming backwards and forwards if you can keep them alive in the mid row. To keep them alive in the mid row, Reliats do a really good job. Bear in mind, this is in situations where you are mostly running Frigate Destroyer, because anything above Frigate Destroyer might have a target priority against Cruiser, so they aren't going to go for the Reliat, and in that case, you are just going to lose, say, the Cruiser if they have got target priority on Cruiser. Anyway, same as the armor, you want to go, same as the A and B, you want to go into the armor, pick up the missile and torpedo enhancement here. You can pick up the energy resistance, or you can pick up the ship HP. The ship HP technically works out a little bit better than the energy resistance, but it's not really too much in there to really make too much difference. After that, I recommend going into the field camouflage. You get a base 35%, you get a reduced chance of being intercepted. That means when your torpedoes and stuff fire, they get more chance of being hitting their target. And for modules in here, picking up the guided weapons first, followed by direct fire weapons first, will solidify its defense, and it will live in your mid-row for a very, very long time. After that, going into the stealth torpedo system is going to help you out a lot. But to be honest, you can just leave it as a mid-row tank and just ignore the fact that it's got a weapon system. Like I said, it struggles mid-game to get its damage application, unlike the energy torp does. Early game, this thing is absolute beast. You can run 10 of these as a single fleet to go wipe NPC fleets out up to like level 4, level 5, and they'll just sit there living and laughing and just shooting stuff forever. It's great. So you can build these quite early on, and you'll have them for a very long time. They're great for that kind of situation. They are also good against player fleets, exact same reason. Dodge rate in the early game is king. Later on, it's all about health and sustain. So dodge rate, early game, mid-game, early blends into mid-game a little bit, but then sustain from cassocs and stuff like that means you want resistances and armor a bit more later on. Either way, go into the missiles, go to the hit rate again. Same thing with most systems. The hit rate will give you a vastly better damage output. Overall, it's just an efficient way of just getting more damage output without having to spend too much tech points. The crit on this system is a little bit awkward. It doesn't have crit built into the system. However, it does actually crit, especially if you start picking up the reactive explosive warheads and stuff. In the case of that, it does help a little bit, but note that although it doesn't say it has crits on system, it can actually crit. We did confirm this. We have a spreadsheet by Null Pointer a long time ago that confirmed it. I think pretty much all weapon systems have a chance of crits. Just the ones that have crit built in have like a set chance to crit. That's way above pretty much everything else. So personally, hit rate, cooldown is my way to go here. So you got hit rate, cooldown. You have 4 slots remaining. Personally, for me, I like picking up the chance of torpedo interception. He is reduced. This is due to the fact that, like I've said previously, LCAA is coming into its own a little bit, and interception in general is becoming a bit of a thing in some of the bigger fleets. This will actually help you apply your damage. I wouldn't take it early mid-game, but mid-late game, definitely pick this up, drop something for it. I would personally then pick up double damage, leaving you, I believe, 5 of your 7. 2, 4, 6. 5 of your 6 slots remaining. So hit rate, cooldown, double damage is 4. You can go double crit, and that's for your 6. And then what I do late game is drop one of the damage mods for the reduce the chance of all torpedoes being intercepted by 6%. Although upgraded 60%. So it's actually really good because it stacks additive again with the 30% reduction from the information warfare system, or field camouflage system. So, I said I'd mention at the end of C that something that's really quite nasty is running both C and B types if you have the tech points. This is one of the reasons why I have almost 200 tech points in here. It is hilarious watching people trying to get through a special Carillion front row, double Reliat mid row, and then a bunch of Noma supports in the back. It's hilarious. They sit there for literally minutes and minutes and minutes trying to kill off your stuff, while your special Carillion is either flat out dodging stuff as it's coming in, or it's being hit, it's got down to 10%, so it's evaded back into the mid-row, it's lost targeting, the Nomas are healing it up, everything that can target the mid-row is targeting stupid dodge rate stealth Reliats or torpedoes Reliats, and now the special Carillion's like back up to health, and it's like, oh, I'm going back into the front row. It's quite a funny thing to watch. You can do something similar with the Ruby Defensive as well. If you have Ruby Defensive in the data server, I believe it is, there's a mod that increases its healing efficiency on itself, and it works a similar way where it just out heals so much potential damage incoming that's kind of hilarious. And you can support that with Noma for even more healing for almost like a mini immortal fleet. It does fall off mid game though. However, the double Reliat B and C in mid row is pretty prevalent. It works pretty much all game. My third fleet, which is a Frigg Destroyer fleet, because I run a lot of cruisers and hybrid. I run a hybrid for my main, and then it's a very heavy sort of tank fleet for my second, and then my third fleet is a very fast-hitting cruiser frigate destroyer fleet, and Relics then sit in there late game for rapid responses, either running onto an outpost or something like that, killing off some miners. That's where these sort of come in and work really well for me anyway. So there you have it. That is the Reliat. Hopefully this video is not... oh, God, it's 32 minutes. Well, you wanted an in-depth guide. There you go. It's 32-minute video of me talking about 3 variants of ships. And I will try and remember to chapter them if I can. So, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I'll catch you next time.